Hello and welcome to Nirmal Bang, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hiral Dadia. We have with us Mark Martin, founder and CEO, Martin Consulting, joining in. Mark, we've just been discussing ahead of the interview such unprecedented times that we have been witnessing across industries, across economies. What's the sense that you pick up with this lockdown that has already started? In fact, now we are seeing some bit of easing that's happening.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks for having me, and stay safe, everybody. I think what's critical at the moment is we need to look at how the world is shaping up. In the last 3 months, the forced lockdown and the forced lockup of airlines and aviation services is something which is man-made. It's created by us. It's the virus. It's how COVID has forced us in that spot. But if you really look at it, the travel growth from last financial calendar year, from October till December, even January, was marginally better than the previous year global across the world. In India, we were not doing so well because obviously we had our own economic issues to deal with. But collectively, if you look at it, while global markets were on a state of recovery and doing marginally better than financial year 17 and 18. So we clearly kind of have got ourselves or painted ourselves into a bit of a spot. But I think once we have some sort of a sustainable and proven a vaccine in place where everybody is inoculated prior to traveling, the virus can be out there. I mean, it could be wherever we go and whatever we touch. It's us contracting it, passing it over to somebody else, and if we take a flight, is going into a host country and spreading the virus there is what would suppress. From an economic perspective, we were looking at the plummeting drop in world oil prices. I mean, imagine a negative 37 on the barrel in US as a result of overproduction was, it's a bumper for anybody. But the challenge there is the cost of refining is still $47 a barrel. So you've got cheap crude, but your refining cost is still expensive. So that also creates a bit of a challenge. Are we going to still need oil? I think the bigger question is sustainability on natural reserves. And that's why we're moving towards alternative energy solutions and alternate oils and so on, alternate fuels in particular. So I mean, the good part is I'd like to look at this as an interesting opportunity for economies, for aviation sector, for the entire aviation vertical, and that is business jets, helicopters, regional aviation, transit airport services, airports, including, and also ground handling collectively.
Right. So, Mark, let's shift focus with regards to where India's aviation sector goes. It was already struggling. I mean, the last 1 year has been really turbulent, especially with jet shutting down. Post that, you did see fares going up because of, less number of aircrafts. And now we've already run into severe turbulence already. What's the kind of impact are you looking at if you have to actually quantify it for the sector as a whole?
Well, if you really look at it, the mortality rate for airlines in India is the highest in Asia. We've lost Kingfisher, we lost Air Costa, we lost Paramount Airways, we've lost several Carnival Air. I mean, quite a few airlines over the last 10 years. At the final nail of the coffin came with Jet Airways when 120 aircraft were just pulled out of our entire India fleet. So the ramp up and the growth demand was not able to be kept up with. I mean, even if you want to, year on year, you might have a 10% growth, but when you lose 100 aircraft, you got to replenish the 100 aircraft plus, pick up a growth of 20-30%. So that's been a major challenge, and that's also led to fares going up and revenue pressures for airlines and unable to make break even. Plus, in the backdrop of a post-demonetization economy, we have had our struggles. But I think the key element of growth is the propensity of the Indian consumer to afford air travel. We must appreciate that air travel today is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. It's
Correct.
an imperative requirement. Nobody's going to spend 36 or 48 hours in a train. I mean, the romance of the rail is for something else. The pleasure of a drive up in the mountains cannot be replaced with a 2-hour flight. But the whole key about air travel is efficiency and to get there in the highest, safest, and most reliable manner. And that is good, and that is the fuel that's driving world economies and growth. As we speak. So I think collectively we will see a very interesting phased rebound. Um, the challenge which I see is, Boeing with the 737 MAX has also had issues. A lot of airlines in India have had that on their order book. And, the Boeing continues to grapple and deal with stability issues and safety challenges. As we know, Boeing is also now withdrawing from the 777 program. Um, Airlines in India had very close interest on the 777 and the 787, so that might be a bit of a drawback. But collectively, I'd like to be a bit more optimistic because once that upswing starts, whenever we have a stable vaccine,
Mhm.
the surge in demand um, is going to dramatically shoot up. And more so since collectively, I see a lot of the aircraft that we're inducting now naturally, uh, as part of the design, have a lower fuel burn, almost 18 to 20% lower burn than the previous engines. So we are looking at a fairly good recovery. Now, when we see that recovery, is we're not expecting business as usual to return anything before 2021 or maybe 2022. And that's when we will see, I mean, the litmus test is when we see holiday makers hop on an airplane and take a break for about a week. Once the travelers, the holiday travelers start booking tickets
Mhm.
and planning their holidays, that's when we can easily call and substantiate that the business is now back to usual.
Right. But with all of this, Mark, you have almost little over 16,000 flights, which were actually aircrafts that have been grounded across the globe. Now, if you have to look at this kind of a number, the biggest concern over here is the kind of maintenance charges that are required, the kind of parking charges that are required. Putting all of this together, do you think it is going to be a major impact to the aviation companies?
Well, you want to add aircraft leasing cost to that list as well,
Absolutely, yeah,
because
yeah.
yeah, because that's the highest cost. So if you look at it in terms of pecking order, right, the top three costs of a typical airline, one is fuel, right?
Hmm.
So when you're not flying your aircraft, you're not spending on fuel. Yeah, the only cost is, as you rightly listed out, is parking, is maintenance, and
Leasing,
is your
yeah.
airport and other related charges. The challenge with that and leasing comes is where you can ideally do what we're working with airlines today. It's called defer, defer, defer. If I can amortize and defer the last 5 months over the next 12 to 24 months, work out a deal with leasing companies, with airports, with my maintenance service provider, at least in some way, I'm going to soften the blow when I get back.
Correct.
No, I mean, an airport is not going to throw you out. Yeah.
Mhm.
A leasing company is not going to say, you know what, we're going to take back your 250 aircraft because you haven't paid us for the last 2 months. So everybody is going to work with you, but it's how you keep up and make that commitment work, and that's the most critical at this stage. Another point I want to mention here is that if you really compare this with the 2007, 8, 9 financial crisis, back in 7, 8, 9, airlines were flying empty seats because there were no travelers. Economies had come to a grinding halt. Whereas look at where we are today. Today, you have people who want to travel, but airlines cannot fly. So the interesting part of that, because I lived through the 2007, 8, 9 financial crisis,
Hmm.
and if I compared the two, I mean, right now it's a walk in the park with Shangri-La, and I think this is a very good time where that relationship with leasing companies and airports come to the ultimate test. And I believe you need to work with them. You need to work with got to work with banks. You got to work with leasing companies, with airports. Come up to a working arrangement.
Mm.
amortize the liabilities of the next 24 over the next 24 months, and you should be in a much better position than the rest.
Right. So, with all of this, what is the kind of estimated loss are you looking at for the industry if you have to look at India alone?
So we looked at a collective loss of, at least for India, we looked at roughly about $2.9 billion if you looked at the total collective loss. So that loss is in two elements. It's
Mm.
upstream and downstream.
Mm.
Okay. So let me explain upstream. Upstream is all the input going to the airport. So that's catering supplies,
Mm.
cargo service providers, right from your keeping the airline systems working, reservation software, GDS, transportation, uniforms, all that. And then there's the upstream. So upstream is the cost that originates from the airport. So you're landing, parking, leasing, fuel, air navigation service charges, insurance, bank repayment, and so on. If you just look at the two elements, we're looking at least 1.9 on a conservative level. Slightly more aggressive would be about 2.5 to 2.9, 1.9 to 2.9 billion on average. Globally, I think the industry has taken a severe hit of at least 30 to 40 billion dollars. Why the 30, 40 billion
Mm.
dollars is because there's some markets which can't be determined in terms of financial impact. So,
Mm.
for example, Latin America, CIS, and Africa, they don't operate aircraft which are as new to what we have in India. So but those aircraft still have a financial liability on them.
Right. Right. So that's a big number that we're looking at. But and with this, are you expect by how much are you expecting domestic traffic and international traffic to drop in India if you have to compare FY21 to FY20?
I think the industry is going to limp back to some level of stability. We have seen in the last couple of weeks, um, um, you know, uh, travelers picking up tickets, making it to the airport, and right now it's one hell of an ordeal. Imagine you need to check in 4 hours before. You got to have that app, and the insanity of the long queues and so on. And so air travel at the moment isn't what you call a pleasant experience. It's an ordeal. Okay. But I think going forward, once we start to seeing some level of normalcy and stability, and once figures come down with COVID, and we see some level of restrictions going, like the
Mm.
mandatory quarantine for 7 days in some states, I think we should see the domestic market look a little better, and the curve going north a bit. But a lot of also we must understand that a lot of the confusion has happened with constantly changing government policies and procedures on the resumption of air services.
Mm.
You
Mm.
know, if I'm going to be quarantined for 7 days, then what use is having the Arogya Setu app? And there's so many elements which even airlines are being pressurized to do, which airlines shouldn't be doing. I mean, there was a huge argument on getting rid of the middle seat. Well, if you're going
Right.
to get rid of the middle seat, then the cost of ticket is going to go 3 to 4 times more, because I'm going to have to pay for that seat. Um, and I can't, and you can't even put cargo on those empty seats, because when it comes to an emergency evacuation, the cargo is going to distract me from getting out to safety. So there's so many bits that have to be balanced. I do believe um, we need to keep improving our resumption of air services plan. I think the government needs to keep working in close consultation with airlines. The government needs to involve ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. We need to have a constructive cooperative program with other countries in the region.
Mm.
Everybody from Singapore to Malaysia, we need to start exchanging notes. And if something works there, we should implement it. If something works here, it should be implemented there. As of right now, we can't go with the one size fits all and I know it all attitude. That's not going to work for aviation in India. It's a constant cyclical improvement plan and procedure, and I believe we need to start doing that if we need to see a good recovery by 2021 at least.
Right, absolutely. Because, I mean, countries across will have to work in tandem, Mark, at least from the aviation perspective, because you'll have a lot of international travelers who will be flowing in and out of the country. And if their rules and regulations do not match ours, or with regards to any other country, there will be a lot of conflicts that will arise. So I think across countries, there will have to be that unity that in tandem coordination that will have to be worked out across the government bodies. But with this, the government did announce a couple of measures with regards to where aviation is concerned. Do you think these measures would be something that would actually provide immediate relief or any sort of relief? Or does that mean that it's just been policy, I mean, business as usual kind of policy reforms?
I'll tell you something very interestingly. Most industries have access to a emergency insurance fund and access. So if
Mm,
the business is down, the insurers say, okay, we know you guys have losses, so we're going to give you some money to tide you over.
mm,
Do we have anything like that with the airline business? Why aren't we softening the blow on air travel and aviation services, during moments like this?
mm.
The aviation industry, or collective, if you look at it, aviation, travel, hotels, and hospitality, is so susceptible to external risk. It's probably the highest at risk. When you have a currency meltdown, airlines get affected. You have oil prices going up, airlines, all, war, famine, pandemics, epidemics, everything gets, the first victim and the first guy to go down is the airline business. But we still haven't thought about any sense of at least a insurance. I mean, as an airline, I don't think paying $100 million a year to a government-backed insurance as a collateralized bailout support at some point isn't asking too much. Airlines can surely put that money up, and I think somewhere there has to be a holistic change in mindset with the government. It's 2020. You have a telecom dispute appellate tribunal. As travelers, if we have a problem with baggage, if we have a dispute, we still go to the High Court. Why
Correct.
don't we have an air traveler dispute tribunal in the country? If someone is not paid for services rendered to an aviation company, he should have a court that's applicable for him, not the High Court. So these are basics that countries, evolved aviation markets have done, set in place, and they work fine. But interestingly, we don't have that in our country. And I think in a way, I think this acts as a wake up call, because this is a good time for us to get our act in order, re-strategize, and get ourselves back on our feet so that we can be more sustainable for the next 10 years.
Absolutely. And Mark, when you talk about India as well, history has actually shown us that best of the reforms have actually come to play in India in times of crisis. So probably this could be a turning point if we actually wake up and start running. But with this realignment and rationalizing, do you think this would also be the perfect time for the airlines to actually rationalize their fleet, take this as the best opportunity to clean up their balance sheets, consolidate, probably collaborate on an overall basis?
Very interesting that you mentioned it. 1991, 1992, India's GDP was 1.6. So
Hmm.
liberalization had to be done. And when it was done, you know, that's what's brought you and me here speaking on the call, right? Um, so, on should the airline re-gear itself? India operates one of the youngest aircraft fleets in the world. If there's anybody who's eagerly buying aircraft out there, and thankfully, knock on wood, banks are still willing to support Indian Airlines buying aircraft. Uh, it's probably because there is a latent inertia demand in India. Our average Airbus fleet is not more than 5.5, 7 years old. Our Boeing fleet is possibly maybe 9 or 10 at the most. So collectively, our aircraft fleet does not exceed an average of 10.5 to 11 years, which is considered one of the youngest fleets in the world.
Hmm.
US, on the other hand, operate aircraft which they inducted back in the 80s. It's not that these aircraft are any less safe. They're as good as the ones we have today, but the only advantage of what we have now is that we're bought new technology,
Hmm.
and we're bought increased and improved reliability with better cost and fuel efficiencies. So that's what gives India the edge at the moment.
Hmm.
In terms of M&As, acquisitions and lateral, inorganic growth, I don't foresee that happening, because this financial crisis or COVID crisis has also kind of wreaked havoc in the financial world.
Hmm.
And if let's assume if an airline in India wants to buy another airline in the world, unless that airline has got deep pockets, it still needs to go and speak to a bank, and banks would still need to look at due diligence and options of investing, and I mean, they will have to raise capital from somewhere to make that acquisition. And banks at the moment are not in a position to support any M&As. Air India disinvestment, if you want to speak about it, Air India it's the second attempt for Air India.
Absolutely.
Right now, no airline in the world has got $9 or $10 billion lying in his back pocket to walk into India and buy Air India, because he's got problems of his own. He needs to fund his own airline. He needs to take care of his own business, you know. And I think that is certainly a major challenge. The government, at least for the sake of self-respect, should step in and say, okay, we're going to hold Air India disinvestment till such time things look better for the industry collectively in the markets, so that we see that the Air India possibly gets a good suitor, and Air India is at least given in safe, stable hands. The other challenge which I see coming up very soon is the financial health of our airports. I think we know very well our airports are in a severe financial situation at the moment. As a result of ILFC's collapse, what was it, 1,85,000 crores worth of funds and investments completely wiped out. So a lot of that funds were, as we all know, they had an exposure with airports. And this week was the most dramatic report that we heard on airports, where Adani was looking at pulling out and exercising the force majeure clause with respect to the 5 brownfield airports. So this sends a rippling effect with everybody out there that airports in India don't make sense to invest. We all know the Delhi International Airport by GMR AI is up for sale. Increasingly, companies are rethinking about their investments and exposure in the airport business or airport services. So we're also dealing with this baseline instability, which I'm hoping should get out in about, I'm hoping in another 12 months we should see some stability. But are they in a financial state to continue for 12 months? And I think that is something which is where the government should step in, at least call them in a room and have a chat and say, look, are you guys all right? Do you need any support? Is there something we can do? What can we do to at least keep you guys going and keep you alive, on even if it's on life support? Because disinvestment and privatization of airports were purely done so that we have world-class airports, so that we have a better airport experience, on the air side as well as on the terminal and on the city side. And a lot of what was initially planned in 2006 and 5, when the disinvestment was done, it was sustained till 2012, but after 2012, 2013, nearly all master plans got completely changed, because it just didn't make sense to put so much of money into that modernization plan. Some airports did it. Mumbai Airport did a fantastic job by modernizing and staying committed till 2017, 18, 19. But I don't think the rest are in a financial state to put that kind of commitment in the airport business right. And that's a major worry. And I hope that the government should take some level of supporting action for airports.
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be some support that needs to come in. And with this, Mark, do you think there is a possibility that airlines will have to actually hold off the orders that have already been placed? Because I was reading a report which indicated that we already have an order book in excess of 500 aircrafts, out of which almost little over 300 aircrafts is the order book with regards to Indigo. Now, if you have to look at these dynamics, how do you think this will change?
Well, if you really look at it, it's a double-edged sword. If I got an order for 10 aircraft, and if I can't buy it, I can sell my production, my order book, and I can send my delivery slot to another airline and make a profit out of it. But that's an extreme situation. That's a distress moment for me if I can't keep up to my commitment of getting an aircraft on board. If you look at some of our larger airlines at the moment, like Indigo, with 250 plus aircraft, I mean, they're at an optimum level of high utilization. And once, see, right now, most airlines have expanded themselves extremely well within India. And now comes the next level is expanding globally. So the order book of 500 aircraft, or more, if you look at it, is more for larger aircraft like 787s and A350s, A330s, which will take you, 12 hours, 13 hours, plus in terms of flight time and endurance. So it's that big growth opportunity is what airlines are focusing on right now because they've expanded enough in India. They've got a very good footprint. Now it's all about yield when it comes to India. The next expansion is global.
Hmm.
And that global expansion is, and I don't think they'd want to pull out from those delivery slots because once we start seeing an upswing, you're going to need those aircrafts you blocked. And I think even Airbus and Boeing will work with whoever that's placed orders to kind of assure them that, look, listen, we're going to hold your orders, don't cancel your booking. Let's work something out. And, I mean, we'll park your aircraft somewhere and when you need it, we'll give it over to you. Because you only make a commitment for those kind of orders once you have financial closure in place, and a lot of them have financial closure, so that's really not a worry and concern. It's only where their local operations are completely come to a grinding halt. That's when you really can't confirm and take a delivery of an aircraft.
Right. So, do you think there is a lot of negotiation and bargaining power that the airlines will hold, with the airplane companies, manufacturers, especially with regards to pricing? Because I was just having a conversation with someone who was indicating that the price of a 777 has now dropped to almost 150 to 200 odd crores. If that's going to be the situation on the order book, they have a bargain on the order book which is pending? They will have a good bargaining power.
Okay, so let me put it this way. A 787 is about 140, $150 million. A 777 is about $110 million. Um, in all frankness, I think it's basically how you work out a deal. No aircraft manufacturer or assembler wants to lose an order.
Hmm.
And and besides, he's still got your deposits. You have given him a deposit and you have locked that aircraft on the production line, so he wouldn't want to lose it because now he's in a dilemma. Who does he sell your aircraft to? Because this COVID-19 impact has affected everybody across the world. It's not that we're having it any harder than an airline in China or
Right.
Germany or Latin America. So it's hit. In fact, it's actually hit those airlines hard than it actually affected us in India. And we know some of the airlines have filed bankruptcy. Air Mauritius has filed bankruptcy.
Yeah.
A couple of airlines in the US have filed Chapter 11. So it's more like they would possibly want to meet you halfway. They will work out a structure that makes best sense.
Hmm.
But interestingly, if Airbus knows that a Boeing order is about to go, then it's a no-brainer where Airbus will knock on your door and give you a much better offer on an aircraft. So we're dealing with that situation as well, and vice versa. Boeing will also want to do the same to Airbus.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to hold those orders, keep a tight grip on them, and try and ensure they don't lose it.
Right. And Mark, overall, we have a couple of questions coming in right now as well from viewers. How essential, sorry, the first one is, how does the costing work in an airline on a, broad basis?
So you're looking at two kinds of costs. You have a direct operating cost and an indirect operating cost. Okay, direct operating cost is the expense you spend on everything that's associated directly with your operations. So you've got your fuel, leasing, crew, maintenance, insurance, airport charges, navigation, and so on.
Mm.
Indirect would be something which is an overhead cost. So bookings, call centers, operations, organization, transport, facility, and so on. But over the last 20 years, there's been a new way to calculate it. It's called COC, or cash operating cost. So what's the money I need to undertake and ensure one flight happens? And
Mm.
that is fuel, catering, landing, parking, navigation, and crew, per diems and so on. So if you really look at the ratio, DOC, direct operating cost, accounts for roughly about 65%, and indirect cost is between 30 and 45.
Mm.
And similar ratio, that's how it varies between DOC and IOC. Cash operating cost, interestingly, comes to roughly about 40% of total operating costs. That's the cash in hand which I need to make my flights leave in the morning, you
Mm.
know? whether that's credit line, whether it's a 30-day repayment plan with the airports, or whatever it is. So the focus is the moment your financial liabilities and your financial performance, uh, your financial situation affects your COC, that's when the chips are down and that's when things are really bad for you. But if you have a balance on your COC and your DOC, your debt operating cost, you're a pretty stable airline.
Right. And what is the break-even model for an airline that should, I mean, what should it look like?
It depends on yield. So let's assume you're in a high competition environment where everybody's competing. So clearly every airline wants to fill up more seats. You have an inventory which you disclose in the beginning of the year. And it's how best you can make up that money. So you got your fuel costs, fuel burn, and efficiency which kicks in. Average break even, at least I've seen in my experience of being a CEO for at least 3 airlines, is between 68 to 75% is the average load factor break even. Anything above that is considered profits, But we've seen competitions being really bad that I've seen airlines force down the cost of ticket to the point that their break even goes up to 78, 79% as well. But that only happens when there's such a dramatic surge in demand. What we had back in 2015 and 16, Delhi, Mumbai, packed flights, and so it's only then we see that kind of a break even happening. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I think 68 to 75% is what's in the ballpark of or in the sweet spot of a good break even.
Right. And what's the sense that you pick up with regards to smaller airlines right now, especially if you have to look at a Go Air? Do you think they will be able to survive this period, or do you think there are chances of bankruptcy? And with this, a lot of arguments coming up that now is the time when a lot of low-cost airlines will emerge as well. However, maintenance and sustainability is going to be their issue.
Well, I mean, the way I looked at Go Air is they started in 2006. They've seen a Kingfisher come and go. They've seen 5 bankruptcies of SpiceJet, literally in and out of bankruptcy. They've seen nearly 5 regional airlines come and go as well. Go Air has survived.
Correct.
And Go Air has grown. Go Air has grown. I mean, they've grown on their fleet. They've grown on stability, and they've grown on something very interesting, and that's what you call residual load. Go Air flies to sectors and regions that no other airline flies to. They fly during times which nobody wants to fly at. Go Air gives you a product that's what you paid for. You get a seat, you get a good experience, a clean cabin, and a safe flight. Go Air hasn't expanded rapidly and dramatically like a lot in the business. They've been ridiculously slow. They've been very steady, very controlled, and they've had a tremendous amount of financial restraint as part of their operations. When everyone else were, rapidly, buying jets like United Airlines back in the day, Go Air said, no, we're not going to buy anything. We're happy with what we have. Let's fly with what we currently operate. So, I'd probably reckon Go Air is the safest airline at the moment, at least from a financial perspective. Also, that they're privately held, and the promoters of Go Air are extremely. They take tremendous pride. There's a whole lot of family ego in it. There's a lot of so there's too many things attached to with the Dadias and Go Air that no matter what happens, I mean, we might lose a couple of airlines, but I'll bet my top dollar that Go Air is going to be still operating that 12 o'clock flight from on Sunday afternoon from Mumbai to Delhi. So I think Go Air is I'd probably place them as being a bit more stable, and them being a privately held company without many financial disclosures. I think that really adds to their benefit.
Right. And very lastly, Mark, one question I want to ask you is with regards to the employees. A lot of airlines have started laying off. In fact, have already laid off, or people are on furlough. Now, do you think that is going to come in as a concern to them? Because once demand picks up, that's when they actually need to get these guys back. And they would probably have to pay a premium to get all of these people back. It's very similar to what's happening in the migrant community as well. They've gone. Now, to get the migrant community back, they will have to pay higher wages on a daily basis. The situation is going to be pretty much similar. So do you think that's going to hurt them?
Very well summed up. Actually, you kind of you took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. You really look at it, I think we need to kind of give the airline business a mulligan here. Everyone clearly has panicked. I think this 5 months has put everyone to a spot where the uncertainty has shot up to the point where they have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. So let's get rid of whatever we have as extra cost. Let's be clear. Pilots, engineers, cabin crew, they're mercenaries. They're not missionaries. They would go to whoever gives them more money. And they have a very sharp memory, when it comes to them being laid off or thrown out. They're very, emotional and sentimental bunch of people. And I think airlines getting rid of them and furlough is fine. Furlough is as simple as saying, hey guys, listen, we got no money, stay where you are, here's 30% of your salary, don't go anywhere, we'll come back to you. Yeah. But a lot of airlines have been laying off people. And so and rightly said, because when the upswing happens and you need the same guy back with you, the chances are he's going to be working with another airline, or he's going to come back to you at least 40% more pay. So, it's he who commands that price, and it's he who calls the shots when things start looking good. And I think airlines need to figure out a way how best to balance um, expectations, whether it's people, whether it's crew, whether it's their own vendors, whether it's suppliers, and take the best out of them, because you're not considered a vendor. You're actually a partner in the growth of an airline, because everybody comes together, even the tax authorities. If an airline is fine, the tax contribution is immense. Similarly with airports, if airline does very well, then he's contributing a lot of money back to airports, and the airports in turn plow the money back to the government, and so on. So an airline is a money spinner, but for all money spinners, they're connected with far too many external linkages. So clearly, I think airlines need to be a bit more mature. They need to kind of really start, for a want of a better phrase, balance that relationship with their largest asset, which is, after aircraft, it's people, and come to a working balance so that you ensure that they're still connected with you.
Right. And lastly, Mark, what's your view with regards to Jet? Do you think it's always still going to be a guessing process? It's been so for over a year now, but do you think it's a wild guess that it is going to be a liquidation?
There's a very sad and unfortunate fact about an airline in India. Once an airline shuts down, it never restarts. And it's been there since time immemorial. I mean, we had private airlines back in the 50s and 60s in this country. So if you consolidate, you become part of a larger group, that's good. But if you don't, you shut down and you don't ever come back. I don't think Jet is in the way we're looking at it, the way this whole process is being handled, with the IBC court stepping in, with the bids which are now starting to be visibly seen, we're not very optimistic of Jet coming back. I know it's very unfortunate. That wasn't something which I hoped for, but we just have to live with that fact. And
but I'll interrupt you. Do you think a bundled offer for Air India and Jet probably could be something that could actually work?
Find me an airline who's got $20 billion in his wallet at the moment.
No, probably the government has to take away the liabilities completely out of it.
You really can't. You have to amortize it somewhere. Even the government, if it takes away the liabilities. You see, Air India is asset rich. They have real estate, buildings, hangars, which is worth a tremendous amount of money. But the government has separated that from the deal. So what the government has done is they've taken away the good parts and they're selling you a skeleton. But that's not the case of Jet Airways. Jet Airways has no assets. Correct. Jet Airways has a brand and an outstandingly terrific customer service oriented brand with a way of working that's uniquely Jet Airways. That's what's made them what they are. So if I were to value that Jet Airways experience, it's invaluable. Even $10 billion can't pay for that Jet Airways experience. So the definition of what, or as they say in Hindi, "Bikne like kya hai?" What's there? What is it that I actually buy into? has to be really looked at closely. Uh, you really can't compare Jet with Air India. They're two totally different ends of the airline business. But I just hope that Air India does not go the Jet Airways route.
Yeah.
I sincerely hope better sense prevails and we take more mature decisions. But on a flip side, I don't think anyone's going to be knocking on the government's door to buy Air India anytime soon. I'd probably give at least 2022 because we need to wait for world markets to recover. Money has to come back. Banks need to be a bit more financially stable. Banks need to start lending, and once that happens, then we could possibly look at Air India disinvestment.
Absolutely. I mean, very well put up that. I mean, nothing should go up in with Air India very much in terms of the jetway in 2022. I mean, once global markets recover, that's when we can actually look at the investment as well. But thank you, Mark, for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on the show. A great, insightful conversation that we've had. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you from Nirmal Bang as well to you.
Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it. And it's been a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thank you. And stay home, stay safe.
You too. Stay safe now.